Hello and welcome to the Digital Zone. My name is Miriam Gray and today I'm talking to Maitreyi, Director of Partner Relations, Trust Funds and Co-Financing at the World Bank. Maitreyi, co-financing got a lot of press this time, and if you can explain in the simplest terms, what does it mean, specifically public sector co-financing, and why is it important?
Thank you, Miriam, and real pleasure to be here. In the simplest of terms, co-financing is really about two partners, two financiers that are planning to invest in a particular country, in a particular sector. In any case, rather than going separately, they decide to go alone, or they decide to go together. And they decide to pool in their resources. They decide to have a single project, single set of processes, and one face before the recipient country. The reason why this is so important, and you're saying it got a lot of press, the reason why this is so important is that in the countries that we work in, you have often many different donors, many different financiers coming together in the same sector and wanting to do similar things, but not doing it together, doing it on their own. And this is a huge burden on the recipient countries. And often these recipient countries, some of them may have lower capacity, but even if they don't have low capacity, the transaction costs are very high for different financiers to go separately. That's why co-financing is so important, is that you actually pool in resources, go one way.
So what does it mean in practice? Can you give me examples?
Yeah, let me give you an example. So let's say we're talking about a project that is focusing on upgrading informal settlements in a city. In a large city, there's a project focusing on informal settlements. One financier says that I'm only going to be focusing on internal roads. Another financier says I'm only going to be focusing on housing. But in order for that informal settlement to get either formalized or to get better services, better infrastructure, what you really need are both housing and roads. And for the person who lives there, for the resident of that informal settlement, you can't separate out these pieces. And for the Ministry of Urban Development that is doing this project, it's a huge burden to be talking about roads on the one hand and housing on the other hand. So if these two financiers actually come together and say we will have one project that is going to focus on upgrading an informal settlement. And we will do roads, and we will do housing, and we will do many other things, because roads and housing are not the only thing in an informal settlement upgrading. That is a cohesive project. That is a project that is holistic, cohesive from a design point of view, but it is also cohesive from a financing point of view. That's how I would describe it in practice.
Okay, that sounds like it's going to be a very important development tool. What are the plans? What are our next steps? How are we taking it further? How are we scaling it up?
Thanks, Miriam. And as you know, partnerships is a huge part of our evolution roadmap. And we have seen during these annual meetings, the word partnerships has come out so many times. Co-financing is a concrete example of what we can do to further partnerships. So what are we doing at the World Bank? We have done several things. Essentially, what we want to do is to create incentives for both our co-financiers as well as our staff to decide to actually pool in resources, pool in minds to go one way. So what kinds of incentives are we talking about? First of all, any kind of financing has got costs. It's got costs for both financiers. And depending on who is the financier that is taking the lead, that financier might say, listen, I need to recover these costs because it's costly for me to be doing co-financing. And so the World Bank does have a costing mechanism. It does share costs with its partners. And what we have done is we have dramatically lowered those costs. So the costs to our co-financiers have been lowered we've taken this to the board and we have got permission from the board to do this. So that's one big aspect of it. The second thing we are doing is, information doesn't necessarily flow systematically. There are many asymmetries in information flow. We are talking about a co-financing platform. And so a co-financing platform is envisaged as a knowledge sharing hub. It's a, you could call it a marketplace where co-financiers, both actual co-financiers and potential co-financiers, can actually meet, come together, and share possibilities for co-financing projects. So, say ahead of the first meeting of the co-financing platform, we would go to our country teams because the action is really happening at the country level. We would go to our country teams and we would ask our country directors, what are the projects that you have in the pipeline over the next 6 months? And where are your financing gaps? And how can we help? How can the co-financing platform help in connecting you to potential co-financiers such that we can come up with a better and a more impactful project? So those are two areas. There's a third area that we have where we are really looking at staff incentives. And we want our staff to know that partnerships are important. We want them to know that, spending the time to do co-financing is important. And so we are coming up with a lot of ways in which we signal to our staff that we are, this is important work. But also our processes. Some of our processes can be very different across different co-financiers, and that can take time because each co-financier comes with its own process. This is a long-term agenda, or at least a medium-term agenda. There's no one stroke of the pen change to this, but we are thinking very, very carefully about harmonizing processes to enable co-financing to move faster.
Thank you very much, Maitreyi, and thank you for being with us. My name is Miriam Gray, and I was talking to Maitreyi Das, Director for Partnerships, Trust Funds, and Co-Financing at the World Bank.